Well, hello, it's Tony here again, and we're looking at another panel. No surprises, we're looking at the Piper PA-24 Comanche from A to A today. So we've done a panel for that one in Microsoft Flight Sim. It's a very complete and well-modelled aircraft using their AccuSim 2 technology that they've been working on for the past few years, and therefore to do it justice and enable some nice air manager flying, we had to do some panels, didn't we? So here we are with those sets of panels for air manager for that particular aircraft. This is the let's bring the panels up. There's the panel set. So what you're looking at there is a couple of images across two different monitors there, so a left and a right one, as per the usual fare, and lots of different options, as you'll see, and I'll explain as we go along the way. So we happen to be just in the aircraft that's got this green instrument panel. It may not be everyone's cup of tea. There's a few liveries there that I've got the grey one, but like I've done with some of my other panels, I've enabled the panels to be able to change by clicking on the gyro suction instrument. So you can bring up the grey livery if you want to at any moment. No matter what aircraft you're flying in the sim, you don't have to change the livery. If you don't want to, you can still fly the same one and fly a different instrument panel colour. So there's the grey variant. We'll go back to the green variant as it matches the one that we're flying today. But yeah, you've got the choice really. So what we'll start, I think, by doing is well, we'll get these control locks off. You can see I've got the view just showing the control locks just to start things off, and you can see on the let's just hide that fuel selector for a minute. You can see on both of these yoke hubs here, it's got this controls locked. Now this is I've made this a user property, so you don't have to use it. You can use the tablet if you want to carry on using the tablet if you want to. But I've also made it so there's lots of user properties for the different options that are within the tablet that you can enable, that when you remove the controls lock on the Air Manager panel, it'll either tick all of those if you put the controls lock on, or it will untick them all. So that includes things like chocks, the pitot cover, tie downs, all those things. I can't remember them all, but they're all in the A2A tablet. So there's a user property for each of those items in that particular instrument. So by default, I'll probably disable them all, so they're not enabled. But it's handy if you don't want to use the tablet for some or all of them, that you can just push this. So what I've made it so that you have to push and just hold it for a bit, so you can't inadvertently do it in flight. You don't want to be putting the controls lock on accidentally. So taking them off and putting them on, you touch the controls lock, and then you'll see the placard will go away on the airman and instrument panel, and you notice in the virtual cockpit the bungee cord has gone on the controls, and then we can touch the hub again for about a second or two, and then we can bring it back at the end of the flight. So we'll go ahead and take it off because we're going to start the aircraft up and go for a quick fly probably. So that's the controls lock. So I've got it turned on at the moment just to show it, and like I say, there's lots of other user properties within there, so you can get all those other things taken off as well, like the pitot covers and whatnot, at the same time as the controls lock. So they all just sync together, so they're either all on or all off, so you can, you know, ready for flight, or at the end of the flight you can just turn them all back on again if you want to. Or you can just not. So because this hub has got another function, not much for the right hand side, although you can enable those the couple of buttons that you see on the yoke hub there for the right hand side as well. But in the real aircraft, the buttons are only on the pilot side, so I only put them on, or I made it a user property actually. So if you select pilot, you get the two buttons. If you select co-pilot, you don't get the two buttons. So that one on that side's got the co-pilot selected, and this one's got pilot. But you could, I suppose, select pilot on both of them, and you'd end up with the buttons on both if you wanted to. But that's just the way it is, I suppose. So I guess what we ought to do is, now we don't need to look at the controls lock anymore. We should bring up probably an outside view of some sort. There we go. And have a closer look at the panels. I mean, I guess now we're not looking at the grey panel, oh sorry, the green panel. We can look at, I'll fly with the grey one. Whatever takes your fancy, really. That's the beauty of having that option. Okay, so let's go ahead and, I guess, start things off by turning on the aeroplane, turning on our fuel selectors. We'll have them both on for the moment. We'll uncock the primer. You just see the primer handle there on the right hand side there at the bottom. You touch and you just hold it to lock it. It's locked when it's in this sort of like straight on position, and then you just give it a single touch to unlock it, and then when you unlock it, if you touch it again, it will prime in and out. Okay, we're not ready to do that, but I just thought I'd show that quickly. I've previously started up here, so I was a bit naughty and I forgot to turn the ignition key off there, didn't I? That was one thing I forgot. So we'll put it to both. We've just turned the fuel on. The park brake is set. We'll have our beacon on. And we'll give it a little bit of prime. Obviously, those of you that have this aircraft will know that it's much more realistic to start this more like a real aircraft than many of the aircraft in the sim. It doesn't just touch a button or flick a key and it starts instantaneously. It can be, just like real aircraft can, a little bit temperamental sometimes, and it seems to be a little bit random as well. I'm not following the checklist here, but I'm just trying to doing the start, but again, it's a little bit random, as it probably would be, depending on temperature and whatnot, into how much you start and how much you prime and whatnot, and whether or not the engine's previously been run or not. I've only just been running this, so that's probably partly the reason why. Okay, so let's crack on with the rest of the panel. We'll start, I guess, well, let's just turn things on. Let's turn the Avionics master on and the Autopilot. So the variant I've got here today is the GTN and one of the Navcom radios. There's a radio stack, but I've done all 5 of the variants that you can select in the tablet. So whatever one you prefer to fly, there's a panel for each of those. So you've got the choices. I think the panels are the 2 Navcoms. One of them's got this this DME function on it, and the other one does not, so that becomes your Nav1 in that case, and then the other one becomes the Nav2, and then there's a transponder, and there's the audio panel. So that's your first panel. The second one is the 430, and this is the COM2 and a transponder, and then the third one is a 530, and this and the transponder, and then the fourth one is both the GNSs, the 530 and the 430. So you don't get the Navcom radio in that instance, obviously, because you've got your Navcoms 1 and 2 with the 530 and the 430 and the transponder. And then the last option is this one that I'm showing here today, which is the audio panel, the GTN and the Navcom. No transponder, because the transponder's built into the GTN. In fact, there's an audio panel built into the GTN as well, but for some reason A2A have chosen, although it mirrors the selection with the audio panel buttons on the actual main audio panel, you can't actually select the audio modes from within the GTN. Now that might have been an integration issue for them, so that's maybe why they've chosen to do it that way. So yeah, you do need an audio panel for the GTN model. So that's what we have here. So, and then the right side panel is the same for all of them pretty much. It's no different. It's got an ADF over on that side, and there's that nice EDM engine instrument. So we're not going to do anything fancy with that, but you can learn how to do that. The buttons, the step and the lean fine buttons are all working, as are all the other buttons actually. Put the fuel pump switch on very quickly. Okay, so I'm not going to worry too much about what we've got here. We're just going to get up in the air and then I can talk about the panels a little bit more. For those of you that are wondering, we're in the Florida Keys. So we're at Marathon, somewhere I visited a few years back, so I thought I'd take a flight from there today, and we're probably going to head down towards Key West, and we'll see how far we get. How long the video lasts. We don't necessarily have to go all the way, but if we do, then great. We'll just see, as per usual, where it takes us. The main purpose of these videos is just to show off the panels and explain what some of the functions are and whatnot, so you can get a look and see of them the working. Most of them are fairly straightforward, the instruments. In terms of other things, obviously they need to be a bit modified differently for the A2A aircraft, which I'll talk about and explain a little bit more along the way. But there's a few little quirks with a few other things as well, so we'll have a chat about those once we get airborne. So without further ado, let's get that park brake off and let's get out of here. So we'll have the strobe on and the landing lights, approach the runway, lock that primer off, so I forgot to do that. Then we'll get a notch of flaps in there. When I can actually do videos from just on I have two computers, and I use one for development, and this is the one I've got the panel still on the development computer at the moment, so I tend to do the videos from that one. It would be nice to actually do it on the proper sim PC where the yoke is set up and whatnot. But we'll get to that at some point. So you'll notice the sounds in this Comanche are quite noisy, and I've put in, there's a function to turn the headset on and then noise cancelling. So down in the left corner here, where the phone and mic jacks are, if you just touch that area, you'll hear it gets a bit quieter. That's the headphones, and you touch it again, and it gets quieter again, and then you've got your noise cancelling on. If you touch it again, you'll go back to no headphones. So that gives you a nice way of just toggling that on and off. Switch, that's another thing I always keep forgetting in this aircraft. Once the gear's driven to one position or another, you just put the switch back into the middle position. Okay, so first thing we're going to probably have a look at then, if we have a look at the left side panel, so you can just see that in a bit more detail. You can do, we're just departing out of Marathon here. Let's follow these road bridges. Is we're going to have a play with the autopilot because it gave me a chance to let that do the flying while I talk and ramble on about the panels. So the autopilot in the in this particular variant is it's an S-Tech System 30 or a model, a variant thereof. So it's quite a basic autopilot. It's based on a turn coordinator, so it's yeah, it's not the best. It won't follow approaches and whatnot, but it'll follow a heading, and you can follow a nav with it. But I guess the beauty of the Comanche is that you spend a lot of your time hand flying it, and it's got some little it's different, so it's something different to learn, so there's some fun in doing that. And so we've modeled the autopilot here, so when it boots up you probably saw the LEDs come on just as it does in the normal aircraft, and then you've just got this mode knob here that's Knobster enabled if you've got a Knobster. So you can turn that on and then just push the button on the end of the Knobster, and then you can turn the autopilot on, and you see every time you touch the button, now we're in ST, which is effectively roll mode. Then we're in heading mode, and it's going to follow the heading bug. Now we're in low track, high track, which is a nav mode, and then back into roll mode again. So what we'll do is we'll just get our, or just make sure we're probably way off on here as well. This is something else that gets quite a lot of gyro GIF. So where are we? We're we're not too bad actually. Yep, not too bad. So let's bring our heading bug up. So the way you correct for gyro drift is this particular knob that adjusts the heading bug. Is you notice it says push to set card. So if you push the end of the shaft once the Knobster's enabled on it, you'll notice that the card itself is rotating. Yeah, so you can correct for gyro drift up there. I'm not going to do it a lot, so I don't want to get a lot out, but I should turn the bug back on and just get us back on straight ahead heading, and then we'll put the autopilot into heading mode. And we'll push see the button just on the yoke hub that we were looking at earlier. One of those is altitude engage and disengage, so we'll push that, and you'll see the altitude light comes on the autopilot. And so just you can just see where we're just holding altitude. See, we're holding altitude quite nicely there, and we'll follow that heading there, so that'll just follow along the heading quite nicely. And you can see if you rotate the heading, she'll bank left as we go left, obviously, sorry, right, get my left and right muddled up, and then she'll turn left as well if we go left. So we'll leave it on autopilot for the moment, and we'll have a look at we'll go back and look at some other aspects. So the audio panel's fairly straightforward. You've got your selection switches, and they mirror it in the sim. Now it's important to say that a lot of these controls, the way A2A have done it, is a lot of the LVARs they provided, you write the LVARs, but it has an effect in so much as it might change stuff in the virtual cockpit, but then the virtual cockpit can't be used thereafter, not without restarting the sim to clear it and resync the states, because you're writing directly to the LVAR and they're using something else to write to the LVAR. So when you write to the LVAR, it doesn't update their state, and so therefore things get out of whack. And so once you control it from the Air Manager panel, this is not all controls, a lot of the controls, they will work both ways, but some of them, particularly the ones that are controlled by the LVARs, once you control it with the Air Manager panel, you won't be able to control it with the virtual cockpit after that point until you restart the sim again. But I mean, I guess if you're flying on Air Manager panels, that's no big deal. It's certainly not for me, because I don't use the virtual cockpit controls anyway. But that's just something to be aware of. Lots of aircraft are like that, but this particular one is quite prevalent in that respect. There's several functions that once you control them on the Air Manager panel, you won't be able to use the virtual cockpit control thereafter, because of the way the LVARs interact with the aeroplane. So what else do we want to talk about on this left panel? We've all seen the GTM before on plenty of other aircraft. It's a very nice unit. I enjoy flying behind it, which is why I chose this one today. But I'll tell you what, I had a lot of fun with this Navcom unit as well. It's a nice little unit, one that I'm not familiar. I know a lot of these particular units, and I've done lots of them. I wasn't familiar with this one, so it was fun getting acquainted with it. It's pretty straightforward, like most other Navcoms you'd expect. You know, you've got the usual inner and outer knobs for controlling the frequency that are Knobster enabled. There's a flip-flop, so you can change your frequencies. And then on the nav side is where it starts to get interesting. So you got the same knob for the frequencies there. There's a knob here, but you notice it also says this is for the volume, so we can turn the volume knob up. But it says here there, push for bearing. So if you push the end of the knobster, or you touch on that, click on the end of that shaft there on that button, if you're not using a knobster, you'll notice it changes the standby display to a 2. So let's give if you're dialed into a particular frequency, it'll tell you what the 2 bearing is to that particular VOR, and then if you push it again, you'll get the from, and then it'll go back to the frequency. So it just cycles around the 2, the from, and the thing, and the frequency, the normal standby frequency there. So that's a nice little feature that you can use. And then next to that, on the other mode knob, is and you get, by the way, you get that bearing on the other Navcom display. They have that function on both, but what it doesn't have this knob that I'm highlighted on at the moment. So the DME function effectively. So what you can do with the DME switch is you display when it's on frequency, you're displaying your normal active frequency, so 113, and then you get your distance readout, so you'll get your nautical miles there for your DME. I should have tuned into one, shouldn't I, so we could have seen this, but it all works. then your speed, then your time to station, so how long it's going to take you to get there. That's calculated from the distance and the speed. And then you've got two hold modes. So what happens here is, if you go to hold, it will hold the frequency, or it will hold the nautical mile value as well, right? So in other words, you can see the frequency there is 113, right? So if we toggle the frequencies, you can see now it's 11025 is the active, and 113 is the standby. We can take that 113 off of that, and you see, so now we've got, if we just press this where it says ACT RCL, that's active recall. That'll just let you show you what you're active if you don't want to touch this switch here. You push that, and that just gives you a quick look at what the active is for a couple of seconds, and then goes back to displaying what you've got ever the mode switch selected to. So we can see there with the active recall that we've got 110.25 dialed in and 116.5, but you'll notice here it's saying that the hold frequency is 113. So effectively you've got three frequencies that you can use there, because you could hold one previously, and what it will do, the DME function will carry on working based on whatever that held frequency is, and that all works, which is great. It even works in X-plane as well, even though this instrument isn't particularly for X-plane, but you know, a lot of these Navcom features, they're useful across different aircraft, and so I get them to work for both the sims. So yeah, that's a nice little Navcom radio that you could use in other aircraft, I guess. But it works quite nicely in this particular A2A. Whether or not it would work in other Microsoft Flight Sim aircraft, I'm not too sure, because I've not tried it. But you know, that's just another nice, even if the DME hold function didn't work, all the other DME function would work, and the dialing in of frequencies would work. So it's another nice little unit. I've spoke about the phone and the mic. Up the side of the GTN is just some marker beacon lights, fairly straightforward stuff. Then you've got your pitch trim indicator. That's over in the roof normally, but you know, it's not really a roof here on the panel, so I had to find somewhere for it, so I put it up the side of that bit of spare real estate up the side of the GTN there. It was a bit of a squeeze trying to get all that radio stack in there to get it to fit with all the different options. This isn't quite the busiest one. I think the worst one is the 530 and the 430 combo with the transponder on the bottom. That's a tight squeeze in there. It only just about fits, but yeah. So, but some of the others give a little bit more generous in terms of the amount of space that they take up. Again, this one takes up a fair amount of space because obviously the GTN itself is quite big, and the Navcom unit itself is not particularly a slimline. It's no SL30, that's for sure. So what we've got now is we've got switch panels along the back. Not a very complicated switch panel in this not very complicated aircraft, but switches for your master switch, your fuel pump. It's a combined nav light switch. On the very first click, it turns the nav light on and it dims your landing gear light, so be aware of that, because the landing gear light is not particularly bright. I've tried to mirror that equally in the simulated aircraft. Apparently that's how it is. So you know, if you want to just see if that light is and you can't see it very well, you have to just sort of turn the dial down to get the light to come on bright, so you can see when it's on or not. That's a little quirk of the aircraft. We can turn those landing lights off now. Then your landing and your taxi light, if you want to call it that, they call it landing right. Your strobe light and your rotating beacon, which you can hear before you start up. You can hear the rotating beacon motor turning the thing round. That's nicely modelled on the aircraft. And then the pitot heat on the end. Then on the right side of that, we've got the key switch. It doesn't have the start built into the key switch like a lot of aircraft. You see it's got a separate start button for the Comanche, but you know, all fairly straightforward there with the key switch. You can do your mag check at the beginning if something you do. We didn't do that today. We were just sort of getting up in the air as quickly as possible, but that all works. The start button is nice. And then the park brake, of course, there's a little quirk. If you've got the realistic park brake turned on in the A2A, you have to have your feet on the foot brakes to pull the park brake up. So please make sure you know how that works. I've seen a few people saying, "Oh, park brake doesn't work," or whatever. It's just a uniqueness, and that's kind of how, you know, how you do it in a real aircraft, or certainly a GA aircraft. Getting some pressure into the brake lines and then pulling that brake lever on and then keeping that pressure in the lines so that you're holding the brakes on effectively. And then to the right of the park brake, we've got the little auxiliary fuel quantity gauge. So that's for the tip tank. So if you've got the tip tanks turned on, you'll get this, and you'll get the switch, so you can see what the level is in each of the tanks. So when the switch is to the right, you're looking at the right tip tank. When it's to the left, you're looking at the left tip tank. And if you haven't got the tip tanks selected and you fly without them, you'll see in the rear, just like in the I keep saying the real aircraft, I meant the simulated aircraft. They put a little sort of red and white bit of stripy tape across the display saying that basically it's not used in this variant, and that's what I do on this instrument as well. So if you've got not got the tip tanks selected, I mean, I guess if you never fly with the tip tanks, you could remove this instrument from the panel. It would be a simple case of just deleting it if you didn't want it. But because if you've got that option to use the tip tanks, or I tend to leave the tip tanks on, then I have the instrument on the panel. But if you haven't got the tip tank selected and this instrument is on the panel, it will appear with a red and white stripe bit of tape across the display, denoting that it's not in use in this particular variant because you haven't got it selected in the tablet. Okay. What else? Well, the 6-pack really takes care of itself, really. There's nothing special to say about that. We've spoke about the autopilot briefly. I guess we should also say that the autopilot disconnect button on the yoke there also works. You see, I just push that now, and now it's flashing just to say that we've disconnected. So we better turn that back on again, turn the altitude back on. And that also works with an autopilot disconnect switch, which is one of the standard bindings that you can bind that. I've got that bound to the yoke in the main sim, and on the joystick here, just on the red button there, you can have that to autopilot disconnect if you want to. The clock and the EGT again fairly straightforward, so not much really more to say about that left side panel. The right side panel, well, there's the EDM, I suppose, is something a little bit different. Engine monitor, so that uses the pop out from the sim. It's got the step and the lean fine buttons that work as a nice little unit, and you get the power up thing at the beginning when you boot it up. Next to that is the RPM gauge, and then the fuel flow, and then below the RPM gauge is the manifold pressure. So there's your three main engine instruments, and then it combines that with the little clusters down below the VOR indicator, the CDI for nav2 there underneath the EDM. There's a cluster of 6 engine related instruments. So you've got your 2 fuel gauges for your main wing fuel tanks, left and right, either side of the fuel pressure gauge on the top row, and then below that you've got oil pressure, amps, and oil temp. So they mirror the gauges that are in the indicator. I must say this aircraft's very well modelled in that respect in terms of the engine parameters and stuff. So many of them, yeah, the data doesn't match what actually the needle's pointing to in the sim, or you find that sometimes, like EGT's a classic one, the EGT needle doesn't move when it should. You know, it doesn't give any reading when realistically it would be reading, whereas this aircraft is, yeah, they've done a really good job with it. They've done a really good job with the engine stuff and the flight model. It's really good. So you get, if it's something that you want to do, learning to manage an engine and get into the intricacies of that with the EDM and these other engine instruments, this is definitely an aircraft that you can do that in because it's so well modelled. And so these are just, as I said at the beginning, some of these parameters, not so much with the flight instruments that we looked at on the left-hand side panel, the standard 6-pack and whatnot, but mainly these engine instruments particularly are using some custom things, probably because they've got their own custom model for the engine. So the usual data, the standard data is not working, but I've made these instruments kind of work with both. So if the A2A data is there, it uses the A2A data. If not, it will flop back to use default data. So you could still use these instruments in another aircraft, and they would still work okay. So I'm just gonna. Looks like we're getting out of where we're going here. So what I'm gonna do is just. Oh, that's the roll mode. Oh, well, I suppose we could show that very quickly. I'm just gonna, let's go back just to the main view here. So what we're gonna do, we're on the autopilot here. We're gonna go back into the ST or the roll mode. You can see there you can rotate the knob, and that'll roll the wings. So you can see the aircraft's rolling now, depending on how much you roll that. Back into heading mode. Whoops. Keep doing that. And then we'll do a 180 here, almost a 180. Come back to the plant. We're burning the wick a bit too much here because I was talking, didn't realise. Down to 75% cruise. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so while she's turning, let's go back and just look at that right side panel again. So yeah, you've got an ADF indicator up the top there, which is obviously linked into the ADF unit here. So this is a new unit again. It's ADF, very similar to the KR87 Bendix King unit. You can flip-flop the frequencies there, and there's a little there's a timer. Toggle through the ADF modes. Or go back to just your normal frequency, and then you can just dial in your ADF frequency however you want. And when you're happy, you can just flop it into the active. So fairly just a straightforward ADF there. But it's nice that you've got your ADF, you've got GPS, you've got Navcom 2, and you've got a nice set of engine instruments there. So we've got just off of the main panel, I guess it's still part of the main panel, but this is like a sub panel, this black area, I guess, where the main instruments locate. Then on the right side panel, we've got an OAT gauge up in the top right hand corner. Then below that we've got a Hobbs meter. Then the panel below that is for the lights that are in the overhead area. So I guess if you had a overhead monitor, you could shove that up on the overhead monitor, but they will turn the when you're at night. That front one particularly illuminates quite a bit of the panel, so if you to turn that on, it turns the overhead light on. These panels lighten if they were dark at night because you've turned the light on, and then when you turn it off they go dark again. So that's a nice little bit of immersion that was added in. All of the knobs here. Do you hear the? I love that about the aircraft. You open a vent or something, an air vent, and you can hear the you can hear the sound change as air's rushing into the cockpit. So they all work. I showed the primer at the beginning. We've got it locked off at the moment, how that works. The CBs are working as well. There's a couple of CBs there, and you'll just notice that under the switch panel, I didn't talk about them when I was on the switch panel, but you can see there's CBs underneath the switch panel there. So what's a good one to choose at the moment that's not going to disrupt things? Landing gear motor. You can see you can pop the CB and put it back in. That all works. Carb heat is another one that you can use if you need to. And then the rudder trim. The flaps is not, it's not a functional gauge. It doesn't, well, I say functional. You don't select the flaps with that gauge, so you will need still regular flap switch. But I mean, most of us have got you know, switches for the flaps externally on one controller or another, whether that's just a couple of buttons on a joystick or whether that's, you know, an actual flap switch that you've got on maybe something like the Honeycomb Bravo or some other peripheral that you might have a switch on dedicated for flaps. Is such a common flight control. But that just gives you an indication, because it's a mechanical flap and it hasn't got an indicator per se, because you can either look out the window at the flaps, or you look at the position of the handle and you can see where the flaps are. There's just an indicator there, just showing the position of the handle. So when it's in that sort of forward down position, as you can see it now, you're clean. And as you introduce flaps, that's the first stage. The second and the third stage of flaps. It's a bit naughty doing that, but there you go. And then to the left of that, the red knob is the emergency gear lever, which works as well. So if, for instance, you have a failure with a gear, you just have to put this, I think, landing gear switch in the down position, and then you pull that plunger up, and it basically just releases the pressure, or opens a valve or whatever in the landing gear circuit, and then the wheels will just fall down to the locked position. And I think the indicator lights, I did try that, I think the indicator lights still work as well, so they still tell you when you're down and locked. And that's pretty much the whole panel, really. That's a, you know, a nice little look at the Comanche panel in grey or green. I actually quite like the green one myself, but you know, I suppose it's a choice, which is why I did it on a couple of other panels where they came with a few different panel choices. So I kind of started off the trend of putting it on the gyro suction gauge, because it was easy on that. I think it was the 152 was the first one I did, and then I did it on the Britten Norman Islander. So I just always keep it now on the gyro suction gauge, wherever that happens to be. If you look for the gyro suction gauge, if there's an alternate panel, if you touch it, then you will get that alternate panel. In this case, it's only the choice of two, the grey and the green. I think on one of the others, I think there's a choice of three or something. But anyway, that's the Comanche and the Comanche panels. I hope you enjoyed them. They're going to be coming out fairly soon, maybe even towards the end of this week if we're lucky. Still got a few little small things to finish off, but as you can see, the basis of the panels are done now. All the instruments are done, just a little bit of testing and checking and writing the manual and a few other bits and pieces that need to be done, and then we'll be good to go on the Comanche. Thanks for watching. See you all again soon for another video. Speak to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.